Good morning, St. Kitts and Nevis, and welcome to Inside the News right here on WINNFM 98.9 for Saturday, May 6, 2023. I'm Devon Cornelius, and thank you so much for joining the discussion. On the panel today, we have Peter Wickham, regional political analyst and pollster. Out of Nevis, we have Mr. Desil Hamilton, social commentator. And joining us from Antigua and Barbuda is Mr. Kamali Mannix, a youth parliamentarian. The discussion for today will be about the expulsion of the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons from the Nevis Reformation Party. She was expelled on Friday, April 28, 2023. We'll take a short break to give a shout out to the sponsors for this program, and when we come back, we'll begin.
Insurance Company Limited, where you get more coverage for less.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly. People make the world go
Welcome back to the program. This is Inside the News here on WINNFM 98.9. I'm your host for today, Devon Cornelius. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As mentioned, we are here with Desil Hamilton out of Nevis, a social commentator, and I could say a political commentator, as he has been given his take on politics in Nevis and across the Federation over the past few months. And we also have joining us regional pollster Peter Wickham. Kamali Mannix should be joining us very shortly. We'll be discussing the expulsion of Cleone Stapleton Simmons from the Nevis Reformation Party. There was a I should say, 4 or 5 months impasse within that party in Nevis, where in the December 2022 Nevis Island Assembly elections, the party secured 2 of the 5 parliamentary seats in the island's assembly. Because of that, they were eligible to have a leader of the opposition and an opposition senator. However, in order for that to happen, the leader of the opposition must first be appointed, and that appointment cannot take place unless that individual receives the support of at least one other person on the opposition bench. That did not take place. There were internal party discussions, trying to find a way to address the situation. In early February 2023, Mrs. Stapleton Simmons was suspended conditionally from the Nevis Reformation Party, all institutions of the party, and on the 20th of April, it was announced via a statement issued to the media that Mrs. Stapleton Simmons was expelled from the party. Peter, Desil, good morning, and thank you guys for joining me.
Good morning, Devon. It's nice to be here.
All right, let's get right into the discussion. We're waiting on Kamani, but let's get right into the discussion. Cleon Stapleton Simmons has been expelled from the party. Now, we'll be looking at this at 2 parts. We'll be looking at what does this mean for the NRP and the NRP's future in terms of Nevis politics. And we'll be also looking at this from the standpoint, what does this mean for Cleon and her future in Nevis politics? Desil, can I get your take to open the conversation or discussion for this morning on the whole situation?
All right, thanks so much. Well, Cleon being expelled from the NRP is not surprising, considering what her decision meant for the party. They went into the election with a bit of with some momentum, I'd say. And having that kind of leadership battle play out publicly wasn't a good look for the party. A lot of commentary basically blamed her for the whole debacle. And so, understandably so, if her position and the NRP's position couldn't come to some kind of amicable solution, the only option that would have been left was to remove her from the party, because she was not supporting the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge, who is the leader of the party, for the opposition leader. So that makes sense. So it's no surprise to me. It's unfortunate that it happened. I think the conflict could have probably been resolved differently. That's just for me personally, but it's an understandable solution. In terms of moving forward, Janice has the Honorable Dr. Daniel Hodge. She has a big part to play as now the lone member of the Nevis Reformation Party in opposition. It's her first time in Parliament, so it'll be interesting to see where she takes NRP in terms of the representation there. Cleon, who has been in Parliament for a while before, she's now independent, so she's not just there challenging the government as a member of the opposition in general, but she also is challenging the NRP because, they've had a bitter relationship, I would say. I think there's no other way to put it. So it'll be interesting to see how she stands there, because technically she has no friends in Parliament.
Technically. Peter, your take on the situation, the expulsion, all of that?
Yeah, morning. No, Diesel's analysis of it is reasonable. I'm not surprised that she was removed. I mean, they indicated a while ago that they had intended to do so. I mean, if I go back a bit, I think that the decision to remove her demonstrates that they're playing a long game. I think that they realize that the likelihood of them assuming government now is quite low, notwithstanding the fact that there are 2 court cases pending. if there was an expectation that they would have been successful and then they would need her to form a government, I think they probably would not have moved. But the fact that they have decided to move against her now means that they're playing a long game and they're saying, look, we're not going to be in government now. All she can give us ultimately is the opposition leadership. She has no intention of so doing. So we could as well cut our losses, impose some level of discipline in the party and move forward. What they have done is they've alienated her, and as an independent politician in Nevis, she will go no further, in my humble opinion. And of course, I appreciate that this is all happening in the way of an independent winning in Antigua and Barbuda. But as I said in another place, my expectation that she will have the level of resources that Asa Michael had to put into winning the seat is that she does not, and as a result, her political career has come to a grinding halt. I think she made some tragic errors. I think she overstated her influence. I think she misunderstood several of the fundamentals that are going to being a politician. And I think that the sun has set on her career. But in the meantime, the Nevis party is as weak now as it was before. And that will continue for the time being. Well, where does it leave the NRP? I think the NRP has a lot of work to do, as Diesel said, and I think that they will start that process now. And they are looking towards 4 or 5 years and in opposition, and then they will look hopefully to form a government outside of that. They have the benefit of a relatively safe seat, which it would be Stapleton Simmons' seat, and I think that they will move shortly to identify a caretaker for that role, which essentially strengthens them politically because they know the next time around that there's an election, the likelihood of that seat going to someone who will jump ship is neither here nor there. Perhaps a little bit needs to be said about her decision to oppose the nomination. My humble opinion is that she misread the power. I maintain, and I will continue to maintain, even though I know that there are people in the panel that disagree, that the Governor General could have exercised the option of identifying our opposition leader. She chose not to. I appreciate it as a matter over which there is some legal, disagreement. But the fact of the matter is that a decision like that is always political. And, in the same way that there were legal opinions that suggested that the Governor General could have appointed Sean Richards as Prime Minister. I think that there is also opinion to the contrary in Nevis, and she chose to go with the decision that she couldn't. Of course, we have to respect that decision, but I do believe that the decision was unfortunate, and it has essentially empowered Stapleton Simmons, and she fundamentally believed that she had the right to give or withhold. I listened to her analysis in a different place of her decision and the suggestion that she never had a problem with the leadership of the opposition. She had a problem with the decision to choose the senator, and it's just abject nonsense. You are entitled to support or not support the opposition leader, but there is no basis on which you believe yourself to have a right to determine who should be the senator, because it's not your role. She thought it was, and she was willing to put her whole career on the line in support of it. And I think that, 5 years' time, she'll be the loser. And the politics of the region is littered with corpses like Stapleton Simmons, political corpses, that is, of people who thought themselves to have power they didn't have. They read the TDs wrong. And, they took a stand, and she will have a last stand in Parliament now with all the power that she ever will have. And then thereafter, she will be consigned to the history books of St. Kitts and Nevis politics, and not necessarily in a good way.
I just spoke about, Cleone's future in politics. Do you believe that she will be able to, over the next, let's say, 3 to 4 years, garner enough support in that particular constituency to win it, considering that the constituency has been a stronghold for the NRP for the past, since the party started? Do you think that Cleone has the resources to get St. Thomas's to vote for her and not to vote for the Nevis Reformation Party?
Is the question to me?
Yes, you can tackle that question. I want to hear from Dissel as well.
Well, let me say this. There's really no interest in independence in the region, and I've done a fairly comprehensive analysis of it. Independents have emerged in the British Virgin Islands in the most recent election. They've emerged in Cayman Islands. I think that there's a role for independents in some of the smaller, especially the associated territories, the territories that are potentially overseas territories. I don't see a role for independence in places where you have a well-developed party system as St. Kitts and Nevis is. So I don't believe independence will work. Having said that, we have some interesting case studies across the region. There's the St. Lucia, where two independents emerged with the support of an accommodation. I know we have most recently St. Kitts, where it's the first case in the region effectively where an independent emerged in a situation where there was no accommodation. My sense is that Stapleton Simmons will not have an accommodation with the CCM because I frankly don't think that the CCM will want to have a formal association with her. And their decision not to run against her if they were to have an accommodation is of very little effect because the NRP support in that constituency is so high that it would not make a huge difference if they decided not to run a candidate. So the accommodation doesn't seem to be working. Can she pull a Asa Michael? I think that's the other question. And I frankly don't think that she can. Asa Michael won that seat by increasing the level of the number of constituents in that seat by registration. And I just finished an analysis of it by 52%. He registered 1,500 additional people in that constituency, and the vast majority of those people voted for him. And as a result, he was able to increase his his support fell, but he was able to win a plurality in that constituency simply because he increased the size of the constituency by 52%. 1,500 more people. That I don't believe that Stapleton Simmons has that capacity. I don't know that she has the resources to do it. And the idea of her being able to say, well, look, I won all these votes on my own, so I can bring them to me now is something I can't accept. Those are NRP votes. And she will basically now have to struggle to build her own brand. And without the kind of resources that Asa Michael had, that is a fight that's not going to end well. So I think that she will perform somewhat like all of the other independents in the region. I do feel that there's a reasonable and fertile analysis for the future of independence in the Caribbean that we can conduct. And I think that we have some good case studies. She, however, does not fall into any of those. So I think that we will be saying farewell to her in relatively short order politically. So yeah, she has the last stand now, and let's hope she makes good use of it.
Thank you, Peter. Dissel, your take?
Yeah, I believe independence is a really hard hill to climb for Cleone, especially now with how her exit from the NRP played out. It's an NRP seat, and that constituency has a lot of support for NRP candidates. I don't think that she has been in that seat in the NRP role for a long enough time for people to be convinced that the things that they get from her as representation is because of Cleone and not necessarily because of NRP. So it's a really tough battle for her. Is it impossible without resources and stuff like that? As Peter said, I have to agree that it is very hard, and she has to rebuild and rebrand. So it's left to see. Again, just as Peter has said, CCM hasn't pulled back in terms of that seat. Latoya has been working in that constituency since her defeat in the general elections back in December. So there's no reason to believe that CCM supporters will become Cleone supporters automatically as well. So we'll see. She has some time to work within the constituency over the next 5 years. She seems tenacious, so I'm sure she will give it some sort of go. But ultimately, when it comes down to it on nomination day in the next couple of years, we'll see if she's there at the polls, or maybe there's some other machinations that are working about in the end, and there's a party to be formed across Nevis for the next general elections. But all of those things are just too like pie in the sky kind of ideas. They just don't seem too real at this point in time.
Can we completely rule out the possibility of Mrs. Stapleton Simmons joining the Concerned Citizens movement, or them inviting her into their organization to be the representative for that constituency. I asked that question because you just said, Disil, that Latoya Jones, who was the CCM candidate in the December 12th poll, she is still campaigning. She is still out there meeting with constituents, talking to people in the constituency. So is it safe to rule out that possibility? What would it make sense for CCM to have a candidate there still campaigning and then still invite Mrs. Stapleton Simmons, who is the MP for the very same constituency? Disil?
Well, yes, I really don't think they will invite Cleon into the fray. Even based on how the political fallout has been and the comments that have come through the CCM, it's never been anything, in my opinion, that supports Cleon 100%. They've used the opportunity to target the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, Janice Daniel Hodge, to question her leadership and other things, but I've never really seen anything so much as support for Cleon in the instance. The old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but I think that friendship only goes as far as the whole impasse at this point. I don't think there's any real reason for the CCM to invite her along for any kind of serious political movement.
All right. I think Kamali has just joined the Zoom call. Kamali, good morning. Can you hear us?
I can.
Awesome. Great. Welcome to the program. As I mentioned earlier, we are here to talk about the expulsion of Cleon Stapleton Simmons from the Nevis Reformation Party, but we'll take a quick break to give a shout out to our sponsors. And Kamali, when we come back, we want to hear from you in a nutshell. What are your thoughts on her expulsion? And we'll continue the discussion. Let's take this break and we'll be right back.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
People make the world. TDC for service, TDC for quality. TDC your company, TDC for service, TDC for quality. TDC your company. Together we succeed, building our strong community, pressing onward to our destiny. One love, one family. Together we succeed. Let the whole world see. Yes, this is 50.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
This is Inside the News for Saturday, May 6, 2023. It's 24 minutes past the 11 o'clock hour here in the studios of 98.9. I am Devon Cornelius. Thank you guys so much for joining the conversation for today. On the panel, we have Peter Wickham, regional pollster and political analyst. We also have Desil Hamilton out of Nevis, a social commentator, and the youth parliamentarian from Antigua and Barbuda, Kamali Mannix. We are commenting on the expulsion of Cleone Stapleton Simmons from the Nevis Reformation Party. What does this mean for Cleone? What does it mean for her future? What does it mean for the Nevis Reformation Party and their future in Nevis politics? Thank you guys so much for joining the discussion. Kamali, we are back. Thank you for joining. Your take on Mrs. Stapleton Simmons' expulsion from the party?
Good morning again to you and your guests. To me, this is my honest opinion. I think this was the expected outcome. I don't think anybody could have expected anything else. After her suspension from as the statement to say the institutions of the Nevis Reformation Party, this was the only logical end result. That after your suspension and you refuse to comply, then obviously you are put out of the party completely. I think, in my honest opinion, when they suspended her is when they should have expelled her from the party. I think they waited a little bit too long, but maybe that's just me and my heart for quick justice. But I think for her, it is the signaling of the end of her political career because she's still relatively new to the politics of Nevis. And of course, she ran in a constituency that is a safe seat for NRP. And so once an NRP finds a candidate, which I'm sure they will, one who is competent and people-friendly and an individual who is willing to work over the next couple of years, they stand a chance of being able in the next, Nevis Island elections to be able to take the seat and edge out Cleone. And that is if she even stands to run again in the constituency. So I don't think it does much for the seat. I think it will return to NRP if all remains equal and people continue to vote as they have done in the past. The only thing that I find might be a bit interesting is the optics of it from the perspective of leadership, because I know since this whole situation has evolved that there's been a lot of attacks on the leadership of Dr. Daniel Hodge. The whole aspect of, okay, a good leader should be able to keep the party together and make whatever necessary concessions. But yeah, we've had multiple conversations about the whole course of events. And I think my position is well known at this point as to how I think the whole situation should have been resolved. But be that as it may, we are here. She's no longer a member of the NRP, not by her own will, but by the will of the party's executive. It's the logical course of events. It's just left to see what impact, if any, it will have on the politics of Nevis and the NRP.
Do you think that she'll be able to, in the next 3-4 years, do some work and win the constituency?
No.
If she has the resources from the government? All right.
Unless she has an unknown reservoir of money that's just sitting down there waiting to pop up. Not likely. Independent candidates don't really go far. And if it is that she, let's just say, in hypothetical speaking, she creates a party with her as party leader or whoever else, maybe from the NRP that is disgruntled. The most that might happen is you just have maybe a third party in the politics of Nevis. Will that third party go far? More than likely not any which way. So no matter how you look at it from all the political options,
there is already a third party in Nevis, by the way. That party contested the elections in December, and they did not.
A fourth party.
Devon, I'm not too sure if you can remember, but did the Moral Restoration Movement run a candidate in number 5?
No, it was just St. John's, which was the same seat with Matt Brentley and Dr. Patricia Bartlett, and St. James with Dr. Daniel Hodge and Alexis Jeffers. But maybe they might run somebody number 5.
I think it's interesting that Kamali said that the seat would return to NRP. For me, I felt like the results of the last local election was actually too close for comfort in number 5. I think Cleone returned some 50 or something percent. Could be, I think it was about 53, in the range of 53% of the vote. And Lataya Jones got 40, was it 40? It's like 40 something. I don't think it was in the 30s.
It was 40, 42 or 43,
Yeah. So to me, that's pretty close to say that the seat is a safe seat. And I think the NRP should be on guard in that seat. I'm not going to just assume that Cleone has zero support in that seat. With her being an independent candidate right now and running interference in that seat, it could cause some more fallout in terms of
But
the
let me ask you.
percentage of support for the NRP. So I think the NRP needs to tread carefully. The selection of the candidate should be done extremely well, and that candidate needs to work starting now to, rebuild, not necessarily rebuild, but to strengthen
Right,
the
right,
hold in that
right.
seat because having two persons running interference isn't something that you want. So I think they have to you know take stock of what's going on and just not assume that it's pie in the sky in that number five in Nevis
Well,
5.
I agree with you to some extent there, Dessa. Well, let me ask you this: with that being mentioned, do you believe that the support that was garnered by Stapleton Simmons in the last election, do you believe it is a support for Stapleton Simmons, or do you believe it is support because of the fact that she ran on a party's ticket? Because there is this argument that people did not vote for the party; they voted for the candidate.
I
That's
don't
one
believe that.
I
I
can't
mean,
understand.
in St. Kitts and Nevis, we're accustomed to party politics.
Right.
Independent candidates have never really been successful. And she's not like Timothy Harris, who ran in number 7 and who was a Labour candidate for quite a while, who was in government for quite a while. So he was able to build his own brand over time. She doesn't have that, like long-standing kind of hold on the constituency for people to fall in love with her more than the party. So ultimately, the party was the deciding factor in terms of getting her into parliament, I believe. I'm not going to pretend like she does not have any personal support at
Right,
all,
right,
or
right.
there aren't any persons that might be pro NRP and
Yeah,
Cleone, or however, the mix might come. So I just
right.
think the party should be a bit guarded, not just, assume that it's going to be 100%.
I do
I think they
believe.
still stand a favorable chance of getting the seat, but just in everything you have to have a strategy. Just don't relax. I don't think this is a time to relax. I believe they'll select a great candidate. I've heard whispers, and I'm sure we've seen talks coming out, Devon, of
We have
specific
seen
people.
talks. I mean,
Yes, 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 yes.
from where I sit, and following what's going on on social media, the party has essentially has already found a candidate for St. Thomas's.
Yes,
The St.
yes,
Thomas's
yes.
has also restructured their constituency executive. The work started, I think, it was last
The
week
work has
Saturday.
started already. So, kudos to NRP on those
Yeah,
movements. So,
they did it
let's
fast.
see what will happen going forward in number 5. It is for them to claim to claim and reclaim, but in a very strategic
Okay.
manner. Let's not
Let's shift the
relax.
conversation just a little bit, right? Earlier we talked about, I think it was Peter who was talking about, the leadership, right? No, in all of this whole turbulence for the NRP for the past 5 months. December elections, 2 seats, they came out, back and forth between party leader, deputy leader, suspension, expulsion. There are people who have questioned the leadership of the party, the Honorable Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. Let's begin with you, Peter. What does this mean for Dr. Daniel Hodge and her future in politics and as leader of the party?
Well, I mean, for me to start with, it demonstrates that she understands the political reality. She understands that if she's going to be a future leader, she has to do a couple of things. One is that she has to stand on her own 2 feet politically. I think that she's demonstrated that in her own constituency, winning it in a way that surprised many. She could have attempted certainly to challenge the staying Stapleton Simmons in her own seat to get her safe seat right in, and she decided, what, I will make my own way. And I think that that's to her credit. I think she also understands the reality facing her now that, it's unlikely that she can win the short-term battle, and she has to look at the long-term battle, which is to have a party that is committed and willing to support her. And she's playing a long game. So I think that for those two things, she's impressed me. I am impressed at the fact that she understands, what she has to do. And she also understands that, Rome wasn't built in a night. And well, or a day. And I think that to me says a lot about her leadership potential. So I think that she's doing well. You know, the fact that she was unable to garner the support of a person who had some issues with her going back, even to the point of challenging her for leadership in the past, says that she understands what she's facing, and she realized, look, if I can deal with this issue, let me deal with it out front. And I mean, Kamali, we remember the similar conversation that we had about Asa Michael, and the question as to whether it was wise for Prime Minister Brown to go after Asa Michael in the short term, or whether we should just let him languish and be a long-term problem. And I think that in the same way that he said, "I'm going to deal with this issue," no, she's saying the same thing. Let me deal with this issue now, and it shows political strength on her part, and it's something that I admire. So I think that she's safe. And I think that she's doing well. When it comes down to it, she led the party to an increase in support. I think I measured it about 4 or 5 percentage point swing, which is fairly impressive. Frankly, I think that they would be in government today were it not for this massive overseas vote that the CCM is frankly in love with. So I think on the ground, and I could stand corrected if Diesel is seeing something differently, but I think on the ground, the political wind is blowing in her favor. So, kudos to her. And we see how she's able to pick it up as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, she will be able to rely on the fact that she ran in a constituency that was traditionally CCM. She held her ground. She was able to win it. People will be looking at that. Diesel, what says you?
Well, I support what Peter is saying about the grounds really being for NRP in that last election. Honestly, the party did extraordinarily well, having turned number 4 and also having such close margins in number 1 and number 2. That was really impressive. So I think that there is a lot to be said about the Honorable Janice Daniel Hart, a lot of good things. She has a different brand of leadership than persons are accustomed to in St. Kitts and Nevis, but it's been working. She's won her seat and she's now steering her party in a very, very difficult time. Everyone wouldn't agree 100% in how the whole Cleone issue was handled. Some people may have felt like, it should have been dealt with sooner before they got to the polls, and then this fallout happened afterwards when they really needed to keep the momentum that they had going into the election. Others would say, deal with it now, so that it doesn't become a long-term problem. So but again, the leadership challenge has always been there, or the leadership, issue, I believe, has always been there ever since she came in, and she became the leader of the NRP party, although Cleon would have been the only elected representative at the time, and having that safe seat. Prior to her becoming the leader, the Honorable Joseph Parry would have been the one who was the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, who was in the same seat as Cleon. So, different people have different opinions on how things maybe should have happened when she came into the party. But she's also not been there for, well, she also has some legacy towards her in terms of the Nevis Reparation parties. And I think that her type and brand of leadership is what the party needs at this time. It kind of throws off the CCM in terms of the way that they're coming at the NRP. There's still some local NRP mouthpieces that are playing the same game, but Janice has spent a reasonable amount of time, trying to change the narrative. And so I have to give her some credit for that. She represented herself very well in Parliament when they spoke during the budget presentation. So I think she can only go up from here. And once she continues that momentum, I think, and NRP really launches their different candidates for the different constituencies, I think they can only garner more and more support. So all is not lost for them. I think there's some positive energy that can come once they capitalize on it. And it's good to know that now the team is more united, having removed Cleon from the party. All they have to do is get people to show support, and I think they'll have a good time.
Should Dr. Daniel Hodge have compromised? Should Dr. Daniel Hodge have said, okay, Cleon, I'll allow you to choose the senator, or I'll allow you to be leader of the opposition. This'll, and we'll go to the others.
My brand of leadership is about compromise. So my answer is going to be yes. I don't think that she needed to compromise on being the leader of the opposition, because she is the leader of the party, and generally the leader of the party becomes the leader of the opposition. But knowing that Cleon stood in a position of influence or even power with her stance based on the constitution, instead of losing out on both, I think she could have compromised, become the leader of the opposition, and find a way to steer Cleon towards we call it again, a senator that both of them could have reasonably worked with. That is how I would have dealt with it. So I think there was that option. I think both parties, however, were resolute in what they wanted. So there was no movement, but that is the outcome that I actually was looking forward to. Some kind of compromise that gave each person a bit of the win. I mean, when you have somebody who wants to be seen and who wants to be heard and who has cards to play, sometimes you have to give up something. The long game, the path to victory in the long game could differ for different people. And for me, I would have liked to see some compromise on the matter.
Peter?
No, I'll answer the question this way. Do you think that if there were, let's say, 50 votes in the other direction, and the NRP won the election and they had the majority, that she should have allowed Stapleton Simmons to determine which ministry she would get and which senators they would appoint to be part of the NRP government? I think not. And I think that against that background, I would say the same thing should apply as leader of the opposition. Were she in Mark Brantley's party, would Mark Brantley have given her the opportunity to choose a senator? Would Timothy Harris have done it? Would Dr. Drew do it? Would Dr. Douglas have done it? Frankly, I think that the answer to all of those questions would be no, because if you allow her to choose a senator on this occasion, then essentially it means that you have no power, because as the opposition leader, you only have the power to do one thing, which is choose a senator. If you decide you're going to surrender that to one of your members, then she can let the senator come in, and the senator essentially answers to her. And it puts, to me, the opposition leader in a very vulnerable position, where the one sole act of patronage that you have to exercise is being exercised by someone else, and you're almost a puppet of your sole member. And it would be, in my opinion, it would be a disaster, recipe for disaster later on, because it ultimately means that, the leader of the opposition is not the real leader. It's also not consistent with what the Constitution of Nevis anticipates. So my answer would be no, and I think it was opportunism on the part of Stapleton Simmons. She saw an opportunity and she attempted to exploit it. As I said, 50 votes in the other direction, and the question would have been a completely different one, and we would have answered it resoundingly no. So I don't know. I hear this talk about consensus leadership a lot. And it always catches the interest of opposition parties, because I appreciate that our Westminster system is a winner-take-all, where essentially it gives the leader considerable power and it disembowels the opposition. But when we are in opposition, we always hear, it'd be nice to have this consensus leadership and persons will lead by consensus. And I'm yet to see a situation when it happens. And I had to say on another program that was what destroyed the People's Revolutionary Government in Grenada, because there was this understanding that Morris Bishop and Bernard Court should operate based on consensus, and there would be a leadership committee and they would share and whatnot. And it came to a point where, someone has to decide. Perhaps the consensus model is what works in the United States of America, where there are zones in which Congress dominates and there are zones in which the president dominates, and they have the opportunity to forge consensus. Perhaps that's a model, but I know in our Westminster model, it doesn't work that way. There's no consensus. It's adversarial. It creates adversaries, and it essentially gives the winner the opportunity to dominate. And that's the way it works in government and opposition. So Dr. Hodge has to understand that, and I think she clearly does understand that this is no birthday party or a Sunday school picnic that we're talking about. This is politics.
Kamali, your take.
Repeat the question.
The question was, should Dr. Daniel Hodge have compromised and allowed Cleone Stapleton Simmons?
That's a question they're really going to ask me, Devon. You already know my position on that. Absolutely 110,000% no, not at all, not at all. This idea that as a leader, you're supposed to always give way in the interest of the body, give way in the interest of the institution, or you're supposed to give way because, the circumstances allow it. It is absolute stupidity, because the reality of the situation is this. You elect me as leader because insofar as you're concerned, I am fit to make final decisions. Because that's essentially what a leader is, eh? Everybody states their piece and leader listens to all and sundry, and then I say, okay, so this is the final way we're going to go based on what I've heard. This idea, especially in politics, we're not in kindergarten. We're not playing some game out on the field. This is politics. Particularly in the field of politics, there's no room. There's very little room for compromise, particularly in the political system that we have decided to adopt. It doesn't give way to the leader having to constantly decide, Cleone says she wants to try, and, she say, if I do this, then that. No, that is stupid. Because then what you're essentially doing is creating a party within a party and creating a faction. It doesn't work. It would be more contentious than problem solving. Because if she can give way on who appoints the senator, the next 5 years or 4 years or however long the term for the Nevis Island Assembly is, it means that she's always going to be expected to give way. And then let's say in the next election, the Nevis Reformation Party wins a majority and they're able to govern Nevis. Then she's supposed to govern as premier and constantly give way. So when Cleone says, I want to be deputy premier and I want to have responsibility for agriculture and youth and finance, and that she must give way again, you're setting up a precedent that can be very dangerous. And since as far as I am concerned, for those who will say, for Captain Hindsight, who will say, but she could have just, given her a bly and listened to whatever she said. Moron, be quiet. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Do you think that would have fixed the whole impasse? No, we know that there were about 3-4 months of a whole public spot where we've been hearing that they were at they were not able to agree. They were not able to agree on who should be the opposition senator. We know that in the first stage, there was some back and forth about who should be the leader of the opposition. Do you believe that if Dr. Daniel Hodge had, come to the conclusion and say, okay, I'll allow you to pick the senator, do you believe that would have fixed the whole situation? Or would it have been a disaster for NRP, which would have then been a disaster for the people of Nevis?
It would have opened Pandora's box of hell, because again, it would have created a precedent that she can be bullied or she can be forced into positions where she must comply to the will of, this term tends to be taken as an insultive one, but her subordinates, right? For me personally, you can say all of these things, if she had, I disagree. I think the position that she took, which was to remain resolute, was the correct one, because it shows strength of character in terms of her ability to lead. So for me, this whole situation has come about, which is very unfortunate, because I think had NRP kept up its momentum, it meant that in the next, general election, then they would have been able to have some level of strong possibility of being able to retain the government of Nevis. That didn't happen. And then you have foolish situations like this that, could possibly exacerbate the condition. And because this is a setback to the party to some extent, because now the party must now go through a process of not only finding a candidate, more than likely adjusting the members on the executive who might feel, okay, I'm a staunch supporter of Cleone, so I'm going to go wherever she
I was
goes.
just telling Disil that they've already done that.
right? And then you have to continue to, of course, hope that this new candidate that you get is able to rally enough people around their cause that in the next election that they win and keep that particular seat on the side of the NRP. And you know, it's just all these buts and ifs and no have tos that did not have to ever take place.
All right. Guys,
that's true. I just kind of want to respond to Kamali just a little bit.
Go ahead quickly,
and
Dissel.
I can understand where he's coming from and what he's saying, and in terms of the precedents that it would have been setting. And as Peter said, in our system, you know, it's basically winner take all. But we are continually seeing around the region places where people are getting upset with their leaders and deciding that they're gonna mash up things. So, like here in Nevis, particularly, where the margins are so small, can we really afford to constantly not be upsetting our subordinates? That's just something that I want us to consider.
But that's crazy though, Dissel. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned that, right? But I don't know what that's crazy. I see it as wasting people's time because for me, and I'll be very frank, I am not going to join an organization knowing that there are certain things that I would have to abide by, certain rules that I would have to follow, and then in the long run say, man, to hell with all of that, I'm going to do my own thing. I think that's disingenuous, and that should not be. Guys, we'll take a quick break to give a shout out to our sponsors because we have to. Drink some water, come back, and we'll continue the conversation. This is Inside the News right here on WINNFM 98.9 for Saturday, May 6, 2023. I'm Devon Cornelius. For those of you who are just joining the program, we have Peter Wickham, regional pollster, youth parliamentarian Kamali Mannix from Antigua and Barbuda, and Dessel Hamilton out of Nevis, a social commentator. We'll take this break and we will be right back. Stick and stay.
Found the sound 98.9
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
If you need protection, you need one who you can trust. To secure your investment, you need one who'll do you just. TDC Insurance, you're the one that you can trust. TDC Insurance, you're always safe with us. TDC Insurance is your go-to insurance company for all your insurance needs. We take pride in offering you the best solutions and ensuring our customers are fully satisfied. TDC Insurance, we take good care of you, guaranteeing you peace of mind. You're always safe with us.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News. I am Devon Cornelius. It's Inside the News for Saturday, May 6, 2023. For those of you who are just tuning in, we are on the topic of the expulsion of the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons from the Nevis Reformation Party. She was suspended in February of this year, and on the 20th of April, it was announced that she has been was expelled from all institutions of the party. That essentially means she can no longer represent the party. And you would recall right after her suspension, she did announce that she will be an independent representative. Well, that has been solidified. She's now an independent representative in the Nevis Island Assembly. Guys, we have touched on what does this mean for Cleone, what does this mean for NRP in a sense. We've touched on Dr. Daniel Hodge and for the question of what does this mean for her leadership. My question, what does this mean for NRP as a whole? Can the Nevisian electorate look at NRP and say, okay, this is the party that I would want to put into government in the next 5 years, considering that there would have been this impasse? Or is it that people are looking at this as just what it appeared to be on the surface? Stapleton Simmons negotiating and saying, okay, in order for me to support you as leader of the opposition, you have to allow me to choose the senator. Desil.
Yes, well, definitely the NRP needs to do some cleanup in terms of how the Nevisian public sees them at this current moment. I mean, it's hard to see that this was the party that almost won the elections, having such a big bacchanal just moments after
Right.
Devon, you're laughing just moments after the election. So that's really hard to see. It's surprising, and the CCM has ran with that conversation throughout. You know, look at this fallout. These were the people that were almost into government. Suppose they were in government, would have this happened if they went into government? Would we even have a government? Because they can't get along. So that idea needs to be cleaned up and cleaned up fast. A proper PR campaign or something has to be done, and different actions and movements to show that the party is still very much unified has to hit the airwaves, and they have to go back and focus on not this whole bacchanal, but more on the failures of the CCM and what's hasn't been happening ever since the general election. So I think now that the expulsion is done, and kind of as Kamali said, if this was the ultimate decision that needed to be taken, it probably should have been taken sooner. I can give the NRP credit for allowing the disciplinary committee to actually do their investigation and handle, pass down the information to the executive on the matter, within whatever reasonable time that they had. So it kind of, in one sense, it shows that they weren't ready to handle a situation like that because the disciplinary body wasn't there prior to this event happening. It's set up now, and it was the avenue used to come to the ultimate decision. So it kind of shows that the party is structured, but they didn't necessarily have all the things in place to handle something like that. So I think it shows some growth for them, but they really just need to get back focused on CCM, focus on what's happening for the average division, focus on the different struggles that people are going to, and focus on what really got them so close to victory in the first place in the last election, so that they can move forward. Ultimately, the party has been around for a number of years. I think this might be a time where there's, a shift in terms of what the electorate is looking for. CCM obviously should be also cognizant of that as well, because, their numbers were, to me, very abysmal in the last election. So I think everybody should be focused on, what does this mean for moving forward in the next 5 years. A lot of the persons who voted in the last elections, we have younger people coming into this coming up in this next 5 years, that will be voting as well. So how are we going to engage these people? How will they see us as a party? These are questions that need to be answered, and the NRP has to answer those questions quickly and take whatever momentum that is left from the last elections and move forward.
Peter?
Yeah, no, I'm I'm looking at the NRP's performance and the division assessment of the NRP performance in the context of the last election. There was an election in which the NRP gained 3,500 odd votes. The previous election, they gained 2,800 odd votes. There was a significant increase in their support in the last election, and essentially they grew their support in all but one constituency. I said 50 votes just now. The reality is that it was really more 30 votes in another direction, and they would have been in government. Certainly, if they were in government, this issue would not have arisen because Dr. Hodge would have been considerably more powerful, 1 seat difference, and she would have been considerably more powerful. And unless Stapleton Simmons is completely naive politically, you don't play these games with a leader because you don't hear people playing these games with Mark Brantley. You don't play these games with a leader because you understand, quote unquote, which God you're serving. So I don't think that the need for disciplinary committee, and I just want to correct you, Dissel, that generally you don't have a disciplinary committee in place on an ongoing basis. It's something that is on a need to establish basis. And generally speaking, that's how political parties do it. When they need to, they get it together. There have not been a lot of expulsions over the years in the Caribbean from political parties. And the reason for this is simply because usually when people hear of the disciplinary committee being assembled, they just leave. They don't fight it. Asa Michael would be an example of a slightly different where he actually fought the disciplinary committee all the way to the court. And he really fought against being expelled from the ALP. In Barbados, we had Dr. Maria Agard, who went before a disciplinary committee and lost. She took the matter to court, and she lost at that level. So Michael won in court, but he still wasn't able to maintain his role as the representative for the party. So I think that issue, of course, the disciplinary committee and whatnot is not, isn't really neither here nor there. They have done what they have to do. So my feeling is that the people of Nevis have essentially conveyed a significant level of confidence in Dr. Hodge and the NRP. And I don't know that this bump in the way has made a huge difference. And I saw a situation where the Barbados Labour Party narrowly lost the government by 1 seat. They suspended a member of parliament by the name of Dr. Maria Agard. And then in the next election, Prime Minister Motley came back and she won all the seats. Now, one could have argued that it would have been highly unwise in a situation where a 1 seat difference could have meant that you would be able to win, disciplining a member of your side that was helping you to maintain that 1 seat difference. But they did it anyhow because they felt that the way that Marie Agar was carrying on, it wasn't really helping the situation. And they said, look, let's invest in the future. And I think it's a similar logic now. So as to how the people of Nevis view the NRP, I think the last election results are a pretty good indication of how people view them. And I think that says that, people do feel that they're blessed. One of the issues, Diesel, that I think Nevisians have to really deal with soon is this overseas vote situation. And I'm sorry to be the one regional analyst that is constantly harping about it because it is something which I would have in another life played a part in formalizing as a consultant to the Electoral Reform Committee back in 2000. But yeah, this situation is is something that worries me because I mean I hear varying rumors regarding the number of people that were brought in to vote in Nevis. And I'm convinced to the day that this overseas vote, this imported vote, has essentially determined the last election in Nevis at the federal level and perhaps at the local level too. Because when I see numbers like 30 making a difference, and then I hear rumors about the importation of the number of people, when I compare the results in the election where the borders were closed with the results in this election, it tells me that something is not adding up. And I would hate to think that we've come to the stage now where Nevisians living in the BVI or Nevisians living in St. Thomas are determining what Nevisians living in St. Kitts and Nevis have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Kamali, what about you?
For me,
yes, go ahead.
I think the once NRP can, brush itself off and shake itself together and say, okay, this was a one-off situation, and we're gonna work on keeping the fort together. I think it doesn't spell doom for the party. I think the party does have the ability to come back, to win the constituency that they are represented, and hopefully in a period of time, maybe win the government of Nevis. It's not impossible. It just requires the party to be frank and open to the public and say, here what? As you would say in Antiguan dialect, what could cause this? We never thought this would happen. It did happen. We understand how many of you might feel, but this is just a one-off situation, and the party will hold the fort, and the party will continue to do what the NRP is known to do, so that we can go back to the days where, the NRP is in government in Nevis. I think it is not an impossible thing. It's the reality of politics. Politicians have been disciplined, expelled from parties, etc. I look even at the UK politics, where you had the big beast of British politics, Sir Kenneth Clarke, who served over 50 years in the British Parliament, served in almost every single ministerial capacity, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Foreign Secretary, Defence Secretary, served under the government of Margaret Thatcher and John Major for 18 continuous years. And in 2019, thereabout, when he refused to vote for a Brexit plan, Boris Johnson removed him and others from the party. A man who at the point in time was the oldest and longest serving member of the House. So if an individual of that stature can be removed and the Conservatives still went forward and won a general election, then it means for the NRP, though not in government, they have the ability to discipline a member, and one's able to rally their forces and show the inequities or insufficiencies, whatever they may be, in the government of Mark Brantley, then they can go back to the polls and win.
All right. Guys, we're gonna have to take a quick news break, right? And there was a conversation that we were gonna go into when you guys mentioned going before disciplinary committees. So I know we don't have any legal representatives on the panel, but if we can go into the possibility of there being of Stapleton Simmons challenging the decision of the party will have a convention on the 21st of May in Nevis to elect a new executive and all of that. So do you believe that Stapleton Simmons will be able to challenge the disciplinary committee or the executive committee's decision? Should she challenge? If she challenges the decision, what does that mean for her? What does that mean for NRP? But we'll take this break. When we come back, my colleague Kevin Brown will have to take over. I'm gonna have to run because I'll be attending the funeral of a former coworker and a colleague. So guys, take a quick break, have something to eat, drink some water, catch yourselves, and the show will resume shortly. All right, this has been the first hour of Inside the News right here on WINNFM 98.9. I've been your host, Devon Cornelius. Guys, we're going to have to take a break for the headline news, so we will be back. Kevin Brown, my colleague, will take over. I'm going to have to run to attend the funeral of a former co-worker and colleague. And when the gentlemen come back, they'll be going into that part of the conversation in terms of Stapleton Simmons' possibility of her challenging the decision of the disciplinary committee. And if so, what does that mean? Let's take this break and we'll be right back. Stick and stay.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, and Carib Brewery.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
When it comes to the important things in life, your health, your education, your choice of a life partner, and of course your insurance provider, only the best will do. Caribbean Alliance Insurance is the only insurance company in the Eastern Caribbean with an A excellent rating. We have a robust 3-tier reinsurance strategy that protects our policyholders from multiple catastrophes, even if they occur in quick succession. We spread our risks over 18 territories, ensuring minimal impact to individual territories when a disaster strikes. We provide an excellent claims experience. Claim settlement is usually between 24 to 48 hours. Our A excellent rating means that you are more secure with us. Contact us for motor, property, marine, public liability, employer's liability, and other policies. Delisle Walwyn, people you can trust. Local agent for Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Tomorrow secured. Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
With the WINNFM Midday News, I am Kevon Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories: Vernon Richardson to serve 22 years for rape and 10 years for burglary concurrently.
The St. Kitts Nevis Fire and Rescue Services commemorates International Firefighters Day. Dr. Denzil L. Douglas congratulates midwives in SKN on International Day of the Midwife.
CARICOM calls for end to Russia-Ukraine war, and the Dean of the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps says there is a need for comprehensive action to address root causes of crime and violence in the region. Internationally, the U.S. will soon finalize a regulation to deny asylum to many migrants caught crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. Meanwhile, conservationists in Latin America and the Caribbean want to raise awareness over the spread of non-native lionfish. The invasive species is threatening native populations of reef fish and the livelihoods of people in coastal and island communities across the region. Now the details. Vernon Richardson, 38, has been sentenced to 22 years and 6 months for the offense of rape and 10 years for burglary, which he pleaded guilty for on February 6th. Both crimes were committed on December 7th, 2019. According to court documents, Richardson, also known as Tommy, had a rape conviction in 2013. His Lordship, Justice Ian Morley, handed down the sentences to run concurrently on May 2nd, 2023. The High Court documents also detailed the incident, where the victim recalled the events of December 7th, 2019. The victim, 21 at the time, was at home and at 2:30 a.m., after speaking with her fiancé, had checked her home and went to bed. She was then awakened by the sound of a person seeming to jump down, perhaps from a window inside her home, the judgment said. She found a man later identified as Richardson wearing a mask over his nose and lower face, his eyes exposed. She screamed for help from neighbors before being told to shut up with a gun placed to her head. Choking her with his free hand, she recognized the voice of Tommy. After hitting the young woman in the head with the gun butt, she was thrown to the ground and raped. Richardson then stole a US $500 iPhone and EC $350 from the victim's purse. Richardson was subsequently arrested at his home, and police recovered the cash and the iPhone, showing the victim's picture. Also recovered was a realistic imitation firearm. The High Court judgment shared that Richardson had 17 previous convictions beginning in 2004, when he was 19, which included wounding with intent in 2008, for which he received 5 years imprisonment. In 2013, 5 years and 4 months for rape, and in 2019, 9 months for larceny.
International Firefighters Day recognizes the sacrifices of all firefighters who lost their lives in the line of duty, and also to show appreciation to firefighters for their selfless contributions. In observance of International Firefighters Day, May 4, fire officers attached to the fire stations in St. Kitts took to the streets to partake in the Fire Chief Run. The run is held annually as part of a week of activities organized by the St. Kitts and Nevis Fire and Rescue Services. The officers started the run at the Bastille Fire Headquarters, jogged through the streets of Bastille, and back to the headquarters under the escort of the fire appliance. According to Timothy Martin, fire substation officer in the St. Kitts and Nevis Fire and Rescue Services, the International Firefighters Day was first commemorated on January 4, 1999, due to the death of 5 firefighters at the scene of a bushfire in Australia a year prior. The officers were part of a team that were called to the scene to provide mutual aid. But as the crew headed into the hot zone, the wind suddenly changed direction, and the truck was engulfed in flames, killing all 5 firefighters. Meanwhile, the St. Kitts Nevis Fire and Rescue Services have been maximizing its efforts in ensuring that the community is informed about fire safety awareness through various forms: fire inspections and presentations at businesses, homes, and schools, as well as fire prevention talk shows on local radio stations. The data from the organization shows a steady decline in fires in recent years. There were 695 fires in 2019, 643 fires in 2020, 618 in 2021, and 510 in 2022. Senior Minister in the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, Honorable Dr. Denzil Llewellyn-Douglas, took the opportunity to congratulate the midwives in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis on the observance of International Day of the Midwife. Dr. Douglas stated, quote, "We want to turn our attention to and express our appreciation to our midwives at the hospitals and community health centers across St. Kitts and Nevis and the world at large. We are reminded daily of the importance of midwives among us who skillfully assist in the delivery and care of babies, whether through spontaneous delivery or by cesarean section. Midwives are vitally important." Dr. Douglas also expressed gratitude to the retired and active midwives for their service, dedication, and professionalism. International Day of the Midwife is observed annually on May 5 in recognition of the contributions that midwives play in the international community and to emphasize the meaningful changes that need to be had within the profession. The theme for International Day of the Midwife 2023 is Together Again, from Evidence to Reality. According to the International Confederation of Midwives, ICM, the theme is a nod to the upcoming 33rd ICM Triennial Congress to be held on June 11 to 14, 2023 in Bali, Indonesia. The global midwife community will come together for the first time in 6 years to discuss meaningful changes for the profession, as well as the women and families they care for.
In regional news, CARICOM calls for end to Russia-Ukraine war, and the Dean of the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps says there is need for comprehensive action to address root causes of crime and violence in the region. Those reports and more from CARICOM News Time.
CARICOM heads of government remain deeply concerned about the impact of the ongoing invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, a statement from the CARICOM Secretariat says. CARICOM heads of government registered their deep concern about the severe impact of the war on energy, nuclear security, and global food security. Part of the statement issued on May 2nd reads, "The region urges a return to mature diplomacy and calls on all relevant bodies to intensify engagement to propel an urgent and enduring resolution to the conflict and to build peace. We call for full adherence to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter." The private sector has lauded CARICOM's effort to reduce the importation of food. Michelle Nurse tells us more.
Private sector representatives at a lunchtime discussion praised the region's 25 by 2025 initiative as a timely one and stressed the need for self-reliance and self-sufficiency in food, given the impacts of climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine. The initiative aims to reduce the community's US $5 billion food import bill by 25% by 2025. President of Guyana, His Excellency Mohammed Irfan Ali, is piloting the initiative.
Definitely something that I would encourage everyone to get involved in, because we require a cohort of efforts from the government, from the private sector, even the civil society, and even an individual in the region, because it would help us reduce that vulnerability from external factors such as climate change, economic shocks, and international trade policies. So I think it's a prime time, as he mentioned, to stimulate economic growth in the region and job creation in the agriculture sector, to increase the domestic production and reduce the amount of foreign exchange spent on importing food.
The online discussion on the 21st of April provided insight into the role of the private sector in transforming the region's agriculture sector.
25 by 25 initiative is one that's strongly supported by the Republic Bank Group. It's one that works to the benefit of CARICOM. From our perspective, we have committed $100 million to the financing of sustainable agricultural projects that go directly towards the 25 by 25 initiative.
The panelists underlined the need for self-reliance.
Agriculture is not for the faint of heart because there are a lot of variables involved, but I think that we must understand that one of the things that will create which long-term benefits to the community, the CARICOM community, is to become self-reliant in this regard. Self-sufficient and self-reliant, because we would have understood recently, because even after COVID, we ended up with the Ukraine war, which when we thought we were coming out of COVID, we actually got a surge in the cost of the logistics to get products from one region to the next. And then even the supply of inputs became a difficult thing to get to. So that makes it even more critical for us as a region to work together to become self-reliant in as much of the things as we can.
Entrepreneur Ralph Burkhoff praised the vision of the strategy and pointed out that across the region, people are finally listening and understanding the need to grow more food locally.
Well before COVID, we were so overdependent on food imports as a whole in the region. It's really only because of the initiatives of CARICOM and the leaders who we have today that have accelerated the attention into this sector now, and certainly the COVID and all of the other global factors, have helped put this focus on food security. People are listening now to what we've been saying for years, that we need to grow more food locally and be more dependent.
Ambassador David Prendergast, CARICOM Director of Sectoral Programs, moderated the one-hour session. The next discussion will be held in July. For more on the discussion, please head over to our YouTube channel or our news site, today.caricom.org.
Over the past 2 weeks, we have featured highlights of the regional symposium on violence as a public health issue, held recently in Trinidad and Tobago. Today, we feature the voice of the youth, ably represented by the Dean of the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps, Attorney at Law Ms. Renee Atwell. She calls on regional leaders to comprehensively address poverty, inequality, limited access to education, and economic opportunities to break the cycle of crime and violence in the region.
Poverty, inequality, limited access to education and economic opportunities, these are the factors that drive many young people into a life of crime. We must tackle comprehensively these issues to break the cycle of violence and create a brighter future for our region. Investing in prevention and early intervention measures that tackle these underlying issues is crucial. These programs should focus on providing access to quality education, vocational training, mentorship, and counseling, as well as promoting positive values, conflict resolution skills, and life skills.
We now bring you these international reports.
The US will soon finalize a new regulation by May 11th to deny asylum to migrants caught crossing the US-Mexico border illegally. That's according to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas at a news conference in Brownsville, Texas on Friday.
The situation at the border is a very serious one, a very challenging one, and a very difficult one.
May 11th is the day sweeping COVID-19 restrictions at the border known as Title 42 are set to end.
The border is not open.
Mayorkas said the new regulation is a key part of President Biden's plan to address an expected rise in illegal immigration after the repeal of Title 42, which was implemented by the Trump administration at the beginning of the pandemic and has allowed border agents to rapidly expel many migrants to Mexico.
In a post-Title 42 environment, we will be using our expedited removal authorities under Title 8 of the United States Code. That allows us to remove individuals very quickly. We will, by May 11th, finalize the rule that we published in a proposed format that provides that individuals who do not access our lawful pathways will be presumed to be ineligible for asylum.
Migrant arrests at the US-Mexico border have risen in recent weeks, which Mayorkas attributed to a spike in crosses from Venezuela. Hundreds of asylum seekers are taking refuge on the streets of Brownsville as Title 42 inches closer to expiring. Despite difficulties making the journey, migrants like Venezuelan national Michael Herrera said they won't lose faith. As buses carrying migrants rolled into the transit center on International Boulevard, many waited around, hoping family members would arrive in the next wave.
Caste discrimination exists in countries and cultures around the world. In California, activists, mostly of South Asian descent, are fighting to stop it.
Caste is, a severe form of discrimination that impacts over 5.7 million South Asian Americans. And according to our data at Equality Labs, we have found 1 in 4 caste-oppressed people face physical and verbal assault.
Prem Pariyar is a Nepalese Hindu immigrant and a Dalit, among the lowest category in the caste system. He came to the U.S. after family members were severely beaten by dominant caste neighbors over a minor financial dispute. To his surprise, he found discrimination in his adopted country.
There were some Nepali co-workers also, and they refused to share that shared housing with me because I belong to caste-oppressed community. I was homeless.
California State Senator Aisha Wahab hears stories of caste discrimination from her constituents.
Many of them are unable to advance in their careers, even with the technical knowledge and the education in that particular field, because they are being discriminated one way or another. With a commitment to love, respect, and humanity that I have introduced SB 403 to end caste discrimination.
Wahab has introduced legislation making it clear caste discrimination is illegal, like other types of discrimination under state law.
The individuals feeling that they are discriminated against would still have to have proof that discrimination has taken place based on their caste. just the way that discrimination based on race or gender or age has to be proven.
One of the core complaints we've heard from caste-oppressed peoples is that when they report it, companies are not taking action to fulfill their obligations under civil and labor laws.
Opponents of the bill say it stigmatizes believers in the Hindu faith and could lead to racial profiling.
Hinduism has been reduced here in a lot of public perception and even in the textbooks to a caste, cows, and curry phenomena. And so this just perpetuates those stereotypes, and particularly around Hinduism.
Supporters say the bill isn't about Hindu beliefs.
It has nothing to do religion. This is completely social justice issue. This is human rights issue. This is civil rights issue.
Supporters say if the bill passes, it will be an example for the rest of the U.S. and the world. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Oakland, California.
Divers scouring a reef near the island of Utila. They're on the hunt for a venomous invasive species with a voracious appetite.
Just lionfish are a little more dangerous because they have more.
Caitlin Maurer, an instructor at Underwater Vision Dive Center, knows all too well the devastating potential of a lionfish invasion.
Having dove here 3 years ago to now, the reef is noticeably different. And a lot of that has to do with the predation of lionfish on some of the smaller species. We have the 13.
Though native to the Indo-Pacific, lionfish were first spotted off the eastern coast of the U.S. in the 1980s, likely introduced to the waters off the Florida Peninsula by humans. Since then, invasive populations have spread exponentially.
They have adapted. That's the problem with this invasive species. It adapts extremely well. So it can be found almost anywhere.
We visited a dive site just minutes from Utila's East Harbor. It wasn't long before we spotted our first lionfish. Capturing one, however, isn't as easy as it looks. Securing a kill takes practice and skill. There's also the matter of not getting stung. Though not considered deadly to humans, the lionfish's sting is notoriously painful.
We're back from the hunt and our bounty. We can really appreciate all the spines surrounding the lionfish, 18 spines in total, kind of like a peacock, but packed with venom.
Once properly filleted, lionfish can be prepared in various ways. In this case, ceviche, a simple recipe involving lemon juice and spices.
Interesting, because they're eating everything.
Conservationists like Andrea Izaguirre say that marketing lionfish as a local delicacy is the key to sustainable conservation.
If the community joins together and commercializes lionfish as this tasty treat, then more people will know. There will be more efforts being funded into research on them. There will be more people out there hunting them.
Experts say that while there's no turning back the lionfish invasion, efforts by dive communities like those in the Bay Islands of Honduras have proven very effective.
So just by taking spears on dives or having more people that know about lionfish and why they're so much of an issue and how to safely and humanely kind of help to mitigate it and get rid of them, it actually makes a really huge difference.
Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Utila, Honduras.
Forensic police at the scene of the second mass shooting in Serbia in 2 days, this time in the town of Dubona, south of Belgrade. Witnesses recall the moment the attack happened.
I could hear people running. I'm not sure how many people were running away, but I saw many youngsters.
I looked out of the window, but I didn't go out. Suddenly, I saw people carrying the wounded.
It happened at a football pitch. Armed with an assault rifle and handgun, the shooter opened fire from a moving car, killing and injuring several people. After a manhunt that lasted several hours, police arrested the suspect on Friday morning. Many people are trying to process the loss of people they know.
I am shocked. My daughter is taking sedatives. We couldn't sleep all night. They grew up together, from preschool to primary, and then secondary school.
On Wednesday, a teenager shot dead several children and a security guard at a school in Belgrade. Police say the 13-year-old used his father's gun and had planned the attack for a month. Hundreds of people took part in a vigil at the school in honor of the victims.
This is a tragedy for the whole nation. It's not only a tragedy for the families. This affects our whole society.
President Alexander Vučić has declared 3 days of national mourning and promised to toughen gun control laws.
We will conduct a complete disarmament of Serbia. Penalties for owning an illegal weapon will be much more severe, almost double.
Mass shootings are rare in Serbia. The last occurred in 2013 when a war veteran killed 13 people. One of the biggest questions police are trying to answer is what prompted 2 young men to carry out these violent attacks and why now. Malakaba Motsepe, Al Jazeera.
If the world wanted to isolate Russia, more than a year after it invaded Ukraine, the Russians don't seem to be standing alone. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, was founded in 2001. Since then, it's been a platform for China and Russia to integrate with nations in South and Central Asia.
The world is today facing a multitude of challenges. These events have disrupted global supply chains, leading to serious impact on the supply of energy, food and fertilizers. These challenges, however, are also an opportunity for member states of the SCO.
Foreign ministers of 3 of the world's top 20 economies have attended this meeting in the Indian city of Goa. It's the first visit in nearly a decade by a Pakistani foreign minister to India. Although no direct talks were scheduled, many see the men in the same room as a sign of thawing relations.
Pakistan's foreign minister's participation in SCO, maybe they are looking an opportunity for economic cooperations. And I think that India is very critical, particularly to come out and the economic crisis for Pakistan. That if the 2 countries reopen their border, establish diplomatic cooperations.
India and Pakistan joined the SCO in 2017, and this year Iran and Belarus are expected to become full members. In March, Riyadh became an official dialogue partner of the organization. China stands out with its role in a Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, which many others had tried and failed.
It appears that there is a roadmap for the SCO, and while there is a concern on the new RIC, Russia, Iran, China triangle, unlike the previous triangle, Russia, India, China, and thereby India thinks that it probably will be marginalized in the new RIC format.
With nations trading in local currencies and setting regional priorities, analysts say better coordination between groups such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS group of developing economies is a sign of an increasingly multipolar global order. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
You are listening to the Midday News on WINNFM 98.9. The headlines: Vernon Richardson to serve 22 years for rape and 10 years for burglary concurrently.
The St. Kitts Nevis Fire and Rescue Services commemorates International Firefighters Day. Dr. Denzil L. Douglas congratulates midwives in SKN on International Day of the Midwife.
CARICOM calls for end to Russia-Ukraine war, and the Dean of the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps says there is need for comprehensive action to address root causes of crime and violence in the region. Internationally, the U.S. will soon finalize a regulation to deny asylum to many migrants caught crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. Meanwhile, conservationists in Latin America and the Caribbean want to raise awareness over the spread of non-native lionfish. The invasive species is threatening native populations of reef fish and the livelihoods of people in coastal and island communities across the region. Thank you for listening.
That was the WINNFM Headline News. The Headline News was brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, and Carib Brewery. Did you
you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com. When it comes to the important things in life, your health, your education, your choice of a life partner, and of course your insurance provider, only the best will do. Caribbean Alliance Insurance is the only insurance company in the Eastern Caribbean with an A excellent rating. We have a robust 3-tier reinsurance strategy that protects our policyholders from multiple catastrophes, even if they occur in quick succession. We spread our risks over 18 territories, ensuring minimal impact to individual territories when a disaster strikes. We provide an excellent claims experience. Claim settlement is usually between 24 to 48 hours. Our A excellent rating means that you are more secure with us. Contact us for motor, property, marine, public liability, employer's liability, and other policies. Delisle Walwyn, people you can trust. Local agent for Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Tomorrow secured.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
With over a century of perfection behind the Mackeson name, a smooth blend with perfect balance and richness, it's no wonder Mackeson Triple Stout has a legacy of perfection. Enjoy the world over. Introducing our new look with the same great taste. Mackeson. All hail the king.
Please drink responsibly.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is WIN FM.
People make the world go
Enjoy the convenience of getting all your documents in one place. At the TDC Copy and Print Center on 4th Street in Basseterre, we do just that. We offer document formatting, graphic design, and copy and print services. Our team of professionals truly understand all your needs, whether it be administrative, professional, academic, or personal. You bring it, we deliver it with quality every time. Visit the TDC Copy and Print Center today in the TDC Mall on 4th Street in Basseterre or call 465-2511. Your copy and print specialists are waiting to serve you.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go round.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to Inside the News here on WINNFM 98.9. I am your host for the second hour, Kevon Brown, standing in for Devon Cornelius, who had to step out to attend a funeral. And I am joined by three other gentlemen, as they were discussing before the midday news break. They were discussing the expulsion of the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, elected representative for Nevis 5 St. Thomas's, and the whole Nevis Reformation Party debacle. I'm joined by Desil Hamilton, social commentator, Kamali Mannix, youth parliamentarian, and Peter Wickham, a regional pollster. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and welcome back.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back.
All right.
Yes, good afternoon, Kevin.
So before the break, there was a question posed by Devon about whether or not, can she and should she challenge Cleone Stapleton Simmons, challenge the decision by the disciplinary committee to expel her from the party. And I hope you guys had some time to think about that question and think about what your response might be. We'll start with Peter.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question again? I got distracted there for a minute. You said, can we...
Yes, so the question that was posed by Devon before, because you said that normally when it comes to disciplinary committees and their decisions, they aren't challenged that often. So the question was, can she or should she oppose or fight the decision made by the disciplinary committee?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it really makes any sense. You know, my thing is that when it comes to the point where the party assembles a group to discipline you, I think that the decision has already been made, that they have no desire to have you. Political parties in the region are very much leader-centered. If the leader decides to mount a disciplinary committee, it's a foregone conclusion what the outcome will be. The NRP, CCM, Labour Party, UPP in Antigua, all of them have a similar structure in which the leader is pretty much powerful. The leader can co-opt members onto the party's institutions, and as a result, the outcome of that is a foregone conclusion. We've seen the expulsion of people like the same Asa Michael, the lady in Antigua, whose name slips my mind now, that was formerly on the UPP and is now running as an independent. She was also expelled. We have the one in Barbados that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Agar was expelled. And invariably, peeling that process or challenging the process goes nowhere. I think that Asa Michael did well in getting as far as he did, because not only did he challenge it internally, but he got a favorable judgment from a court. The others never got that far. Some of them never bothered to challenge it. And then in his case, in the case of people like Maria Agar, they went to court and fell flat. He got a favorable judgment. He still was not able to be retained as a candidate, simply because, if a party's leader doesn't want you, it makes no sense for you to be coming around as a candidate, because that's just not the way it works. I mean, maybe we'll get to the stage where political parties are such that you can run, notwithstanding the fact that people don't want you, in the leadership. The United States political parties are such that you compete internally for nominations, and it's possible for you to do like Donald Trump, where you can appeal to the public and hope that the leaders in the party's preference or their desire not to have you can be overcome by public support. But Caribbean political parties don't work that way. So I think in her case, she can challenge it if she wants. Maybe she could take Imad to court. She can do as Asa Michael did, and maybe she will win. But ultimately, the party will still decide, well, look, if you have decided in the short term that you're going to be the candidate and you can challenge that, the long term, however, is that we can replace you as candidate. So there's nothing that any court or anybody can do, anybody within it can do outside of the party, say that they're going to force a particular individual on a candidate on a party. It just doesn't work that way. So she can do it. I mean, it would make sense, I guess, to her logic, but I personally don't think it's gonna go anywhere. Um, I was just listening in the break to an interview that she did before where she talked about, that they just have to agree on the senator, and she reiterated her support for Dr. Hodges as leader, but she said, they have to choose the senator and they're going through the process. And it was fascinating to hear her speak in that way. And this is now a person who is outside. And at that time, she said, "Look, I'm not interested in becoming an independent because I'm NRP to the bone." And now the NRP has removed her, and I guess her priorities will shift to see what she will perhaps consider doing, from there on. But I think challenging the process isn't making a lot of sense because it's not going to go anywhere.
All right, Desil?
Yeah, I can understand what Peter is saying, but I also think we have to take into consideration now that she's made a stake to be an independent candidate. What does that mean for her? Throughout this process, she's been, I'd say, vilified in the public court of opinion. Persons do not understand why she took the position that she did. So, and I don't think she participated in the process of the disciplinary committee, actually. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if she challenges the results from the disciplinary committee. Does it mean that she'd be reinstated as an NRP candidate? Of course not. Would she go back to the NRP party? I don't think so as well. But I think whatever the decision of that challenge, if she does utilize it, would be, to kind of support her movement as an independent candidate. I guess, to free her of the negativity that surrounded her expulsion, so to speak. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there if she does decide to pursue that route. But it doesn't do anything for her in terms of being a part of the NRP organization, as Peter rightly said, and it's challenging. The court can decide whatever it decides. Peter laid out some really good examples there in the Caribbean, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
As was mentioned, I'm sure you guys spoke earlier about the interview that she had on The Narrative with Callistra Farrier. But during that interview, Callistra asked, I think, a very pertinent question as it relates to challenging the status quo, where it's just understood that certain decisions are made by the executive. Do you think that that her move was a challenge to the status quo, or was it a power play? Because that was essentially the question that Callistra was trying to get out of her. And if in fact she was trying to challenge the status quo, I kind of understand why. Because, like you said, she was vilified for her decision, but other people said that she was practicing some semblance of democracy in not just following the staying with the status quo of, following what the executive decided, following what the leader decided. Because I think in any good democratic society, there should be, discourse and disagreements that could be resolved within your internal parties. So what's your takes on that, Desil?
Well, like you said, I think she should be able to speak freely. And even in the NRP constitution, you're allowed to have an opinion. The thing is, you can have an opinion, but that opinion doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get your way. And I think that, for me, is the part where she was vilified, especially in the public. is that she should be able to challenge. People are saying she cannot challenge, or she shouldn't be able to challenge. She has freedom of speech, she has freedom of opinion, and even if you do not like her opinion, it should at least be accepted as her opinion. I think from the time that point came across and she was like, okay, well, let's try and do things this way, everything just broke down from there, and it just went south fast. And there was no time to just maturely handle the situation. I think that's what really happened. There was a level of maturity that was lacking in terms of how people treated the situation. I would have loved to just sit back and watch it unfold properly. I don't think that happened. It just went, everything was just fire from there, especially from the public. So that is sad, I think, and from my point of view. But aside from that, you're part of a political organization. At the end of the day, the party and what the party wants should ultimately be respected. Even if you're just one person standing in the corner, hoping for change, you have to at least have a strategic way of getting, your point across. If it's just you alone, you don't want to die on a hill alone. You would at least want to have some semblance of support from your opinion, whether it be a very popular opinion or it be a more radical opinion. You want to make sure that that opinion has some support. Otherwise, there will be no traction. And I think that is what we saw here. There was no traction of the opinion that, okay, hey, since I'm the only other member and I'm needed to garner support for you as leader of opposition, allow me some, influence over the decision that you will have to make after you become the leader of the opposition. And it's just a strange way of thinking. And everybody was just like, no. But as we can see, it happened and it played out. So at the end of the day, I just think that the communication just kind of broke down into something that just went really, really south.
The entire situation, I've been kind of, it's been screaming in my head. The whole quiet diplomacy that Vance used to say. I was like, what happened to quiet diplomacy? What happened to fixing your issues? But then there's the inverse. Sometimes those issues can only be fixed when they're brought to light. Well, if you're courageous enough to do it. Peter?
Yeah, I think, I think it's probably more bit of both, quite frankly. I think there's one and the same thing. Clearly it was a power play. I always hear these conversations about, the fact that institutions within political parties should work for problem-solving purposes. I always only hear that when parties are in opposition. And when there are opportunities that need to be exploited. So we're hearing that the ABLP should be democratized because Asa Michael is in the position where he wants to speak. Certainly in the past, Dr. Maria Agard, she was saying that the Barbados Labour Party needed to be democratized because she was in a situation where they had a one-seat minority. And she felt that her voice needed to be heard, and she wanted to have it heard, and it wasn't being heard. In the past, Joanne Messiah, who was a person whose name I wasn't remembering, Joanne Messiah felt that certainly in the opposition, especially as she was a member of parliament and the leader of the opposition was not, the leader of the party, the UPP, was not, that she should have been able to speak in that way. And in all of these instances, I think it is frankly a power play. You don't hear those conversations within the Barbados Labour Party, no, because frankly, everybody in there know which God is serving. I'm sorry to be using that phrase, so flippantly, especially as I'm a avowed atheist, but ultimately, politics is essentially about that. And leaders are set up like gods, and ultimately, when they crack the whip, all man Jack has to be silent. The type of leadership that we are familiar with, the Burnhams, the Eric Williams, Bustamante in Jamaica, all of these were people who would tell you, gentlemen, there are drinks in here for those who are with me, and there's a door for those who are not. And that has been always the reality of how it is. So I think that she was ultimately making a power play because she sensed that she had power and influence that she would not have had otherwise. And I would say good on her, because a politician also has to know when to exercise the power that you have and when to make a play for the power that you have. But look at what the outcome has been, because out of it, she played her power, but to me, she played it excessively. Now, my thing is, there's an internal mechanism within political parties that is supposed to be able to solve these issues. So, you have a quiet word with Dr. Hodge, and you say, "Look, this is my view. Can we resolve this internally?" Because the moment that this matter gets out into the public domain, the moment that you're communicating via Callisto Faria and the narrative, essentially it's all over. When we hear Gaston Brung and Mia Motley shouting at each other over the Caribbean Sea regarding Liat, ultimately the time for negotiation is gone. And I think that the same goes within political parties. So there are those opportunities. I think that if Dr. Hodge believed that there was a reasonable outcome that they could negotiate, the matter would not have been able to make it into the public domain. And when I listened to the first interview, she was a different person. So if that was the case, to me, you would have been able to solve matters internally over a drink and deal with matters. I don't know whether ladies drink in that way, but you get the point I'm making. But the moment that you have to go on the narrative and be talking about party business in that kind of way, it's not going anywhere. We saw that vividly in respect to the way that Team Unity broke down. There were whispers from the beginning regarding issues in Team Unity, people not speaking to one another, Mark Brantley and having issues with the group. I saw that situation play out myself when there were questions over whether or not they should have the overseas voting, supported. And there were differences within the leadership of Team Unity regarding where they should go on overseas voting. Everybody in St. Kitts and Nevis knew the different parties' positions on the matter, but ultimately it played out behind closed doors and in an environment that would have allowed for the kind of constructive discussion that one would expect. But then you look at the other issue where there was a complete and total breakdown, and then we heard people making public declarations. So the moment to me that you go public with these issues, it's fairly clear that it's going to become messy and that it will be no end. And I think that that's what happened in that instance. So my short response would be, I think it's a bit of both. She made a power play. The institutions could have worked, but the institutions could have worked when challenged in a situation where the doors were closed. Once the doors are open, ultimately it's going to end here, and that's exactly what happened.
And I think you guys touched on this a little bit, but how do you imagine this new situation is going to play out in the Nevis Island Assembly throughout the next 5 years? Because we have 5 years to go with the current government makeup. How do you imagine that will play out? As in, yes, we have both Cleon Stapleton Simmons and Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge on the opposition benches, but essentially they're not on the same team anymore, even though they're on the opposition benches. How do you imagine that might play out going forward? Anyone?
But you have a pretty good example of how it's going to play out now in the federal parliament, because you have a situation in the federal parliament where you have three different opposition groups. I don't frankly know where any of them sit in relation to each other, but certainly when I heard them in respect of the last budget, they all disagreed with Labour. I got the distinct impression during the election that both Mark Brantley and Sean Richards were appearing to suggest that they may be willing to serve under a Labour Party government if necessary to get rid of Timothy Harris. Timothy Harris was the only person who never committed to working with Labour, although the presumption is that he would have as well. But what you have now is a situation where you have these three oppositions sitting, and they all seem to be uncomfortable with Labour, but they are all equally uncomfortable with one another. So I think that we will now have a situation where in the federal parliament, as well as the local parliament, you have a highly disunited, dysfunctional opposition arrangement in which the oppositions generally agree that they don't support the government, but the oppositions also agree that they don't support one another. And it's fascinating that St. Kitts and Nevis has one of the smallest parliaments in the Caribbean and easily most dysfunctional opposition arrangements in any of the Caribbean countries, certainly that I have seen. And it's almost comical. But, on the mainland at St. Kitts, I do feel that Labour will be the major beneficiary of that level of dysfunction. in opposition until opposition realizes that, they need to get their act together and work out the differences in some public way. And in the case of Nevis, I think the situation will be a little bit different because I think that public opinion seems to be solidly behind an improvement of the NRP. And I think to the point where in the next election, the situation may very well resolve itself because it's a smaller unit and you really only need to have a slight swing in favor and, the situation will resolve itself. So confusion and chaos, I think at the level of Nevis, less problematic. At the level of the federal government, a little bit more problematic. But essentially, it's a mirror in both instances where you have, this dysfunctional opposition forces. Very quickly, if you compare that to Antigua, it's interesting because in Antigua you have an independent asset, Michael, you have the UPP, and you also have the Antigua, the Barbuda People's BPM, Barbados People's Movement, which is also one could say is a disunited opposition. But the BPM and the UPP have worked closely together. And Asa Michael has made it clear that he's willing to negotiate power in any situation where he can get something out of it. I think that his position, as you know, is essentially he's an MP that is willing to work with whoever will help him to advance his agenda, whatever that agenda is. And I don't believe that he will be problematic in that regard. So it's a different thing and is peculiar in that it is like Antigua, but it is highly dysfunctional, notwithstanding the fact that it does bear some similarity.
That's it.
Yes, I completely agree with what Peter's analysis just now. It's a highly dysfunctional setting right now. Cleon again kind of is in a position similar to how Timothy Harris is, where it's her against the world as an independent there, and I don't think public opinion currently paints her in a light where either one of the political parties necessarily would want to put faith in her in terms of moving anything forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately the focus will go back to CCM and the NRP. I think now is the time for her to, rebuild her brand, work within her community and her constituency to change that image for her. So there is some opportunity, and it will be interesting to see how the independent candidate works there. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately it's nothing major or of any real significance coming out of it.
Interesting. But as Stapleton Simmons is the independent, because in the federal we have all parties, even though Dr. Harris is the one man in that party essentially. Cleone is partyless at the moment. She's an independent. And do any of you think that right now is a time where there's an increased emergence in independent political candidates in the region, or even the emergence of smaller political parties that are willing to form coalitions, basically with the same mandate that Team Unity had in St. Kitts and Nevis, is to oust the current government?
Generally, I don't think coalitions work.
We know they don't work, but they serve a purpose.
They do serve a purpose. I think coalitions generally happen when people are just extremely frustrated with a government, and when they need to pool their resources, however limited those resources are, to oust that government, and then they just fall apart from there. But I think it would be interesting to see if there is a surge of independent candidates, especially here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I mean, based on our constitution and based how Cleon interpreted the constitution, as an elected representative, there's a lot of say that you have, that's how you form the government. As much as everybody operates within a party structure, you have to command the support of the majority or the minority or whatever it is. So there's a place for independence if they want. But to say that we'll see an increase in terms of independent candidates coming out, I don't think that will happen, especially here in St. Kitts and Nevis, because I think we have already cemented the party structure here that much. I think parties are evolving and changing. I've seen a shift in terms of how the Labour administration is moving, especially federally. They're trying to bridge some gaps, even in terms of working with the NIA. I think the bitterness has been, reduced quite a bit, and they're trying to, become more involved in the process. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that going forward. But I don't expect to see independence coming out even more so.
Peter?
Yeah, I am. I always try to give my analysis a bit of a regional twist, and there's an interesting dynamic occurring if you look at what happened in Cayman Islands. Let's start with there. In Cayman Islands, you essentially had a government of independence that, coalesced after the elections to form, and in complete opposition to what happened nationally, because nationally there was a political party that won, and the essentially government went in the other direction because you had a majority of independents. Cayman Islands is very peculiar in that regard. I come now to the British Virgin Islands, which is the last election that we had, and ultimately a person who was independent, then joined the NDP, went back to being independent and crossed the floor, joined with the government that had a minority support in the election and essentially forced them into government now, to the point where the premier before is the premier now, even though a majority of people voted against him in the election. And then a similar thing occurred in a couple of other instances in terms of the smaller territories where that happened. And there is an argument on the table that, look, then right, Asa Michael won in Antigua, and people are saying that this is obviously an appetite for independence. Frankly, I still don't buy it, because the independence thing works in either very small territories like that one, or in Barbuda. It works in situations where there's an accommodation, as in St. Lucia, because of course you had two independents in St. Lucia winning, but that was with an accommodation with Labour. Or alternatively, it works in a situation where you have an independent like Asa Michael that had the resources essentially to co-opt enough people into his constituency to be able to win in a situation where his support declined. So those are the scenarios, but I don't believe that this is speaking to a suggestion that overall regionally there is now this appetite for independence. I don't feel that in the case of St. Kitts or in Nevis, there's an appetite for independence, and there's an appetite for third parties or fourth parties or fifth parties. We also have to remember that the UPP, as it currently presents itself, was once essentially a group of parties that came together and said, look, we need to form this union in order to make it work. The PNM, which is, in my opinion, the most successful political entity in the region that has lost less elections than anyone else, was a coalition of parties that essentially grouped together and did the PNM, has held firm for many years to the point where people don't even remember. Ralph Gonzalez, St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, Unity Labour Party, I'm sorry, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Unity Labour Party was also an amalgam of political entities that came together under that umbrella and formed themselves. So to the answer to the question of what is the future in terms of independence and in terms of coalitions can work in situations where they blend and they hold together because they have a common purpose and they essentially make serious decisions in relation to leadership. Personally, I thought that Team Unity could have been that entity, because I saw a seriousness of purpose that suggested that Team Unity understood that if it holds together now, it can win a government in the short term, that they have a prime minister that will hold on for 2 terms, and at the end of those 2 terms, they have a smooth handover of leadership to Sean Richards. The problem, however, is that you had two people in Team Unity that didn't seem to understand that logic, and they didn't hold fast to the principle that essentially maintained them in office in the first place. Now, we can discuss who was responsible for it, but in the final analysis, Team Unity did not provide an example of a coalition that could work. But the UPP, as I said, and the Unity Labour Party did. In the case of the UPP, they were in coalition with the BPM. And the coalition held, because there's really only one seat in Barbuda. But they worked together and they held for as long as they were in office, and then they were out of office, it has fallen apart. But I still think that the argument that there is really no future for the coalition kind of arrangement, it doesn't. I think that in St. Kitts, there are enough political parties, and I think that the opportunities for political parties are maxed out. the coalition between St. Kitts and Nevis St. Kitts and Nevis parties, those are the kind of combinations or permutations that you can speak about. My feeling is that Labour will coalesce with whomsoever it needs to coalesce with to hold itself in office, because it started to look over to Nevis last time when it needed Nevis. The fatherhood does not need Nevis now, and it appreciates on the other side. There's so much confusion, it wouldn't make sense. They're not interested in coalescing, it would appear. And their former coalition partner, the NRP, Labour doesn't seem anxious to jump into bed with them in a situation where they don't have to. So that's where I see it now, and I think that we can take guidance from what's going on regionally. So no future for independent in St. Kitts and Nevis, or regionally, in my view. And I think that the coalition possibilities are always there. But the case of Nevis, for me, St. Kitts and Nevis would be coalitions between St. Kitts parties and Nevis parties, but no new parties can be accommodated, especially when you're looking at seats that have 1,000 or 1,500 voters and that kind of thing. I don't think that it's reasonable to assume that we're gonna see emergence of any new organizations there.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We're gonna take a quick break to pay some bills, and then we're gonna be right back to basically close out the conversation. Maybe do some closing remarks on the situation and what we see going forward. But stay tuned. We'll be right back with more on Inside the News here on WINNFM 98.9.
People make the world go round.
Insurance Company Limited. We care about your investment. Guarantee you peace of mind. The best team in the business. Guarantee you peace of mind. No other company will. Guarantee you peace of mind. Together we'll succeed and guarantee you peace of mind. TDC Insurance Company Limited, where you get more coverage for less.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Back with Inside the News here on WINNFM 98.9. I'm your host this afternoon, Kevon Brown, and I'm joined by Decil Hamilton, social commentator, and regional pollster Peter Wickham. And we have been talking about the political situation going on over in Nevis, where the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons was expelled from the Nevis Reformation Party. So, gentlemen, in closing out this discussion on the Honorable Stapleton Simmons, where do you see her future in politics? In as much words as you could possibly express, what do you think? What do you think will happen to her political future? Because I think both of you mentioned that there seems to be no desire for crossing the floor over to CCM, and currently there's the tensions between her and her old party, the NRP. And Peter, you said that there is not really an appetite for more smaller parties to be popping up, especially in St. Kitts and Nevis. So, what is her political future? Let's go
I mean, I guess if I
yes.
could go first, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
You could go first.
All right. No, I don't really think that she has one. And the trash heap of politics regionally is filled with Keon Stapleton Simmons type persons who have made a stand in the interest of principles that they were strong on. There are some of us who support and admire those principles, but ultimately politics deals very harshly with them, as one saw in the past. So my sense is that she will essentially be added to that group. And I mean, there are people in that group, like the same Joanne Messiah, who personally I think is an outstanding politician and should be part of the fabric of politics in Antigua and Barbuda, but has made some bad decisions. I look to someone like Clyde Maskell, who currently is one of the advisors in the Barbados Labour Party government at the level of ambassador. This is a gentleman who led the Democratic Labour Party at one time and decided that he was walking away from the DLP on principle because he was replaced as leader. She will be one such person. And I think in her own interest, the best thing she could do now is to seek to form an alliance with the CCM. She said that she is NRP to the bone, but she could have an epiphany and, she can negotiate with Mark Brantley and decide whether or not she, could be part of that group, which essentially would give her the opportunity to assume some level of ministerial rank for the short term. If Mark Brantley was so inclined, I personally would advise him against it, but it may be useful for him. So I would think if there was advice I could give to her, having said all of this, is to cross the floor and see if she can enjoy, say, 4 years or 5 years as a minister in the Nevis Island administration, bearing in mind that after that, she's toast politically. But to me, beyond that, I don't really see what alternative path that she will do. She will essentially be a voice crying in the wilderness on the NRP side. And I don't see her having a future in a situation where she's not aligned to either one or the other, because frankly, she's not going to get back in on the NRP ticket. If she is unlikely to get back in on the CCM ticket, but certainly it's more possible for her to have some kind of a legacy in that environment. And I think in closing, I would say the best thing for her to do is cross the floor. It's been useful though over the past couple of weeks to analyze these different scenarios, because I always made the point that even though we may have strong views in terms of what she should do or what she could do legally, it's useful when the bounds of all these things are tested. So we have all these precedents that we can draw on regionally and so on. And it helps me as a political analyst to grow. So I'm happy that she's taken her stand and we can see essentially where the chips have fallen. So in closing, my advice would be to her, to try and see if she can break bread with Premier Brantley and see if she can find common ground on which she can stand. The two political entities are not far apart philosophically, so it's just a question of her presenting the argument that she met the Almighty on the road to Damascus, and she has decided that the place for her is really in CCM politics and all along, and she was misguided, and try and make a name for herself in that regard. So that would be it. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this conversation, not only now, but on the two previous occasions, because I think that we have covered her progress fairly well in the interest of media in Nevis and St. Kitts. So thanks again, and I'm happy to participate in any future conversations that you may have.
All right, thank you, Peter. Desil?
Yes. So I'm learning a lot listening to the conversation, and I really appreciate you guys having Peter on and his perspectives, especially from a regional standpoint and everything about it. I mean, for me, being a politician is about serving people. Unfortunately, you're limited in that capacity on the opposition benches. So as Peter rightly said, unless she can really get into government, it seems as if there isn't much that she can do, but she has a voice that she can use. She regularly meets with the community and Nevis at large on her radio program, Legendary, which I also actually shared that platform with her for quite a while. So she can advocate for the people of St. Thomas's. I don't think she can be counted out completely yet, at least for the next 5 years, but looking at the whole situation, it's an uphill battle. So I really can't say that there is a bright future at this point. But who knows what can happen in that time. She's a young, energetic person. So if there's a lot of work to be put in, maybe she has the possibility to do that. So I try to still, keep an optimistic kind of view on it. She's still alive, she still has energy, she can do whatever she needs to do within this next 5 years to push herself forward. But there definitely isn't a future in terms of being with, I believe, any political party, any existing political party on Nevis. Again, I'm actually happy to also see the situation play out and to have this precedence, actually being set here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and for future persons who actually want to get themselves into politics to see how they standing on principles or whatever it is in a matter like this would get them, how parties respond, how people respond to these situations. It's interesting to see. And so it's a lesson for everybody to learn and to grow from. So I think that's it. And it's been a journey to say the least. And I'm glad to have been able to see it play out.
Okay, and before I let you guys go, we've given advice to Cleon Stapleton Simmons. What would be the advice for the NRP, given the fallout of this entire situation and the conversations about their constitution and about the executive? What would be the advice you would give? We'll start with Deso.
I think if I had to give advice to NRP on this matter, I would tell them that they should move more swiftly in terms of dealing with dissent, and also, keep an eye on leaks, because I think this thing got out into the public way faster than it probably should have happened. So, deal with matters like this internally, because when it comes out to the public, it just looks bad for the entire party, regardless of if it's just one person in the party causing confusion. It just looks bad for the entire party. So these things need to be handled internally. People in executive positions and other different types of positions need to have tailored responses when they come to the public. I mean, much like the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge, she did not feed into the whole rah-rah and way, but on the ground, there were a lot of other persons who I think should have been a lot more responsible with their words, who weren't. So that would be my advice to them.
All right, and Peter?
It's never bad advice, handle matters internally where possible. And I think that the show's advice is reasonable under the circumstances. I don't know that they necessarily had lost control of the message when it got out, but ultimately it wasn't their fault, but ultimately it came out. And yeah, so it would be wise for them to handle matters internally. But other than that, I think the NRP did all that they could do. And I think that they're well advised to press on. They have some court matters coming up to see how those go. But I think that they need to press firm in terms of holding to the position that they do. What I think that they definitely also need to do is they need to develop a very clear position on this whole matter of overseas voting. That's a policy matter that I think is going to be, if they ever gain office in Nevis, they need to come down firmly in relation to that one. On the level of Nevis, if not at the national level in St. Kitts and Nevis, at federal level in St. Kitts and Nevis. But beyond that, I think that they've done reasonably well under these circumstances, and I think that they're being well advised. So I would say to them, press on, just keep matters quiet as you can, but otherwise, just press on in the way that you have been, and hopefully you will get there eventually.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We are just about 2 minutes to the half hour where we're going to end the show. I was joined with Desil Hamilton, social commentator out of Nevis, and regional pollster Peter Wickham. We were talking about the recent developments concerning the Nevis Reformation Party expelling the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons from that party. She now stands as a independent in the Nevis Island Assembly. As it stands right now, as we've heard based off of public opinion and based off of the opinion of our panelists, she's down at the moment, but she might not necessarily be all the way out unless she finds a life raft somewhere in this sea of chaos. But her political future, unless there is some life raft that is thrown from either party, seems a bit down and out. But she still has basically 4.5 years to make her mark, to continue reaching out, to continue doing work in the community. And who knows what, Nevis might suddenly develop an appetite for another party, because technically Nevis does have a third party decile. It's just it's just that in the last 2 elections they did not perform favorably, but they exist. So we will await and see what the future holds when the next election cycle comes about. So thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us here on Inside the News here on WINNFM 98.9. We're going to end the show here. Thank you to our listeners for listening to the program. I hope the discussion was fruitful. Stay tuned for more from WINNFM 98.9.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.